What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video from the 10-7 MMA channel. Today's video is about Conor McGregor, and it's going to be my theory as to why I 100% believe he will return to the UFC and fight in the UFC again. I know 99% of the MMA fan base believes now that Conor McGregor will never come back for myriad reasons. Number one, he seems to be having some personal issues, perhaps speculation of drug problems. Number two, we saw a recent outburst of him in Ibiza lash out at somebody for apparently no reason, is what it seems to be. That seems to be the large consensus, that he just kind of had an outburst. And obviously, reason number three, Michael Chandler was scheduled to fight him at UFC 303 in June of 2024, and Conor McGregor pulled out because of a broken toe. He never had pulled out of a fight before that. So people just feel like he's at a point where he's not taking training seriously, he's not taking fighting seriously, and therefore they think he will never return. And that's fair, and that's fine, and I understand those points. But I actually firmly believe that he will return. And I'll tell you why I actually bought into the narrative originally that he wasn't going to return. But I actually think now he will 100% return based on a couple of statements he and David Feldman made surrounding the BKFC event that just wrapped up. Okay. So we saw Conor toying with the UFC, wanting to fight Michael Chandler in June of 2024. He made that post right after New Year's in January or something, saying that that was the day, but nothing had been officially announced by the UFC. The UFC later came out and they made the announcement. Michael Chandler said, yes, this is happening. The UFC said, yes, this is happening. They had a big press conference planned in Ireland. It was amazing. Everybody was super hyped, super amped for the fight. And then weeks before the event, it got announced that Conor McGregor had a broken pinky toe and decided to pull out of the fight. And the fight just never got rescheduled. At first, they were saying it was still going to happen in 2024, maybe October, maybe November. And it just got pushed off indefinitely. Now, people then were saying that he's just never going to fight. He doesn't have it in him. Even Dana White was saying, well, this guy's made too much money, and so he's stepping away. I didn't necessarily think that made sense for sure, because money is one thing, but wanting to compete, wanting to go out there and perform a job that you've performed multiple times, especially for somebody like Conor McGregor, who seems so passionate about fighting. I didn't think that money was just the end all be all goal for him. I think he's also chasing fame, stardom, success, etc. And so I thought he would still come back regardless of the amount of money he had made. Plus, I don't want to get into all this, but I also feel like Conor seems to be the type of person, looking from the outside in, that may be spending his money not in the most responsible way possible. So I don't even necessarily know how much financial security he has. Maybe he does have a lot more than I think. But anyways, so for myriad reasons, I thought that maybe he still would return. But then as the time went further and further away from the Michael Chandler fight, I started to think that actually he wasn't going to return. And the main reason why is because I thought he was waiting out his sunset clause. So for those of you guys who aren't familiar, the UFC sunset clause, at least historically, which was really brought to attention by Francis Ngannou, is a 5-year period from which any UFC fighter signs a contract. And regardless of whether they meet their contractual obligations of the number of fights on their contract or not, 5 years after the signing of the most recent contract, the sunset clause takes over and a fighter is legally released from having to fight for the UFC. That exclusivity that's in the contract, that is now gone. It's null and void. So they can go and fight wherever. And that's what happened with Francis Ngannou. The sunset clause came into play, 5 years after he signed his last deal. He refused to sign another deal. That's why he never fought John Jones or all these other things. And so when that contract expired, he was able to go off and box Tyson Fury and everybody else he's boxed since. So that's when a lot of people got to know about the sunset clause. Now, just to give you guys an overview of how the sunset clause came about. So the sunset clause came about in 2017. This is the AI overview. I've also pulled up another article because sometimes the AI overview can get a couple things wrong, but I think it's pretty accurate here in this case. So the sunset clause was brought in 2017 after there was that antitrust lawsuit, and there was a 5-year maximum length. The sunset clause established a 5-year maximum length for UFC contracts. Once again, meaning usually you fulfill the contract by fighting a certain number of fights on the contract. Some fighters have 3 fights, 6 fights. It depends. fighter to fighter. But regardless, if you signed it in 2012, let's say you signed it in 2017 and now it's 2022, but you still have 3 fights left in your contract, theoretically, the sunset clause would have come into play, because as long as you're now 5 years beyond the date of signing that last contract, the contract is now null and void and you can exit the UFC and fight for whoever you want. So this is what allowed Francis Ngannou, as I mentioned, to exit the UFC without taking on additional fights, which he did not want to. And they only wanted to give him more fights by having him sign a new deal. He chose to just wait out the contract and do his thing. Okay. Now, I thought that Conor McGregor was potentially waiting for the same thing. His last fight was in 2021. Again, he had the Michael Chandler fight, but I thought maybe he's waiting out a sunset clause from that last contract signage. And maybe that was going to happen in 2026. That's 5 years from the last fight in 2021. I don't know. This was just a theory. And MMA Joey has talked about this a lot as well. But now, upon further review and diving in a little bit deeper into what these sunset clauses actually look like now, they've been revised and revisited, apparently. I don't think that's the case. I don't think he's anywhere near his sunset clause coming into play, and I'm going to tell you why. There were actually modifications to the sunset clause. So if you look here from the AI overview, I also pulled up another article just to verify that this is exactly the case. So the changes to the sunset clause post Ngannou are as follows. So the starting point has changed, and this is very important. The UFC contracts now indicate that the sunset period starts after the fighter's first bout under the contract. So not just from the time when they signed it. It's not like, hey, we signed it and 5 years from now, this is null and void. You have to have at least one of those fights that are in the contract in order for the sunset clause to begin ticking. And if you don't ever take that first fight, the sunset clause does not kick in. So what we can think about here in terms of the Conor McGregor situation is that if you think about it like this, and he's talked about how, because he's such a high value fighter, a lot of times he'll sign 1 fight deals, 2 fight deals, like really small numbers. So the question is, are we talking about a contract back when he had his last fight against Dustin Poirier? Did he sign something new once he was going to fight Michael Chandler? I think he signed something new. So that means he probably signed a new contract at some point in 2024, leading up to that 2024 fight. Again, this is a theory, but I'm guessing he signed a 2-fight deal. That's what he keeps saying. He keeps saying, I have 2 fights left in my contract. So I'm guessing he signed a 2-fight. There's no way he signed a 3-fight deal when he was fighting Dustin, because he's talked about this publicly. I don't believe that. So I think he must have signed a new 2-fight deal when he was scheduled to fight Michael Chandler. That fight never happened. Now, granted, that was only a little bit more than a year ago, but regardless, he never took that fight. That means that his sunset clause is not going to get activated. It hasn't been activated until he at least steps in there and has at least 1 fight. But I think he's going to have to fight out both of his fights, and we'll get to why in a second. Now, just to bolster this notion that indeed the sunset clause has been changed, here's another article that I found. This was from, can't remember if this is from MMA Junkie, but anyways, so this is a little quote from the agreement and from this article in general. But again, this is about the major changes to UFC contracts. So check this out. Another welcome change stemming from the antitrust lawsuit was the sunset period added to UFC contracts. Francis Ngannou was able to become a free agent, as we already mentioned. But unfortunately, the section has since been tweaked. Oh, yeah, this is from Bloody Elbow. So contracts Bloody Elbow have obtained now show the sunset period starts after the fighter's first bout. Again, confirming what the AI overview said. Instead of the clock starting with the day the deal was signed, they've also added this clause stating that suspensions no longer count on this duration. So if you sign the deal and you have a suspension until you can fight, doesn't matter. You're out of luck. It does not begin tolling until you have that first fight. Now, here's the language. Notwithstanding the foregoing, the agreement will not be extended pursuant to the section for beyond the date, which is 5 years after the fighter's first bout under this agreement, provided that any period of time which the fighter is unable or unwilling to compete because of the suspension part or anti-doping agencies shall not be counted towards such a 5-year maximum turn length. So that's in terms of it being extended based on submission. Compared to the previous setup, this new language could easily mean that the 5-year period essentially ends up months or years longer, especially if the athletic commission medical suspensions are included. But what's really important for Conor has nothing to do with the suspensions. It has to do with when the clock begins. So if he never takes a fight, my understanding, right, the sunset period doesn't begin until you take that first fight after the new deal is signed. He's locked into the UFC forever. So he's got to take at least one fight with the UFC if he ever wants to fight for any other organization. But I think he's actually going to take both of those fights. That's my theory. And now we'll get into why. So you guys have probably seen, right, with BKFC, Conor has become essentially the promoter of BKFC. I know a lot of people like him as a promoter. Actually, I think he does a pretty good job. People, it seems to be the popular thing nowadays to crap on Dana White and say how he's checked out and he's so bad and all this stuff. I mean, the guy's still showing up to a lot of the events. He just showed up at UFC Nashville. I think he's still doing a great job from my vantage point about talking about the fights and hyping them up. And I'm sure there's so many things he does behind the scenes that people have no clue about. I mean, most people are out there criticizing Dana White who've never even tried to start a business or run a business or whatnot. So I'm sure there's all these different things that he is doing really, really well that he just gets no credit for. Maybe because he's not as amped up as he used to be. They think he's just completely checked out, but that's just perception. Anyways, like my point in bringing that up is as much as Conor gets into the theatrics and gives these really heartfelt speeches, I mean, to me, I still feel like Dana White is far superior to him if you consider the all-around job. And also, I don't even know whether or not to believe when Conor is hyping things up so much. I mean, it's so theatrical. Yeah, okay, it's cool to listen to, and it kind of gets you fired up. But if he keeps doing that just to be a salesman, right? Eventually, you're going to start losing faith in the products he's pushing. So I'm not saying he's doing that, but that's just food for thought. Cut Dana White some slack. But anyways, listen to this right here, where Conor is asked about fighting for the BKFC, and I believe this supports my argument, my notion, my theory that he's got to fight for the UFC before he can do anything with BKFC. Check this out.
Folks, Ben Davis here for Bally Sport. Excellent to hear about the fighter equity and the compensation. Truly awesome. Conor, I have to ask, though, $25 million tournament. How interested are you in competing in that?
Here. Look, it's a 185-pound to 265-pound tournament. I do like the dough. I'm in this zone until I can clear my slate. It's looking like I'm headed to the Oval Office again. So that's where I'm heading next. But I let these men fight for this one, and I'll support them and back them all the way. But to have equity stake in a promotion at ground level, we are at ground zero here.
So there you go. The important thing that he said there was, until I clear my slate, it looks like I'm heading to the Oval Office. He's returning to the UFC. A lot of people say, oh, I think MMA Joe even said, I don't believe this at all. And I understand where he's coming from. But because he's locked in and literally cannot fight anywhere else, I think he's going to do it. Plus, he's got, I don't know how much equity he's got in BKFC, but I assume he's got a reasonable stake. There is no better way on planet Earth that you could raise up the promotion of BKFC than to have Conor McGregor fight for BKFC. So he's got to do it. He's got to get in there. He's got to fight in the UFC. He's got to get that bag. He's got to exit from the UFC, take one fight, at least get the sunset clause rolling, and then 5 years later he can dip out. I don't think he's going to do that. What I think he's going to do, he's going to take that fight. He's going to try to line up 1 second fight, roll out of the UFC, and then finally have a fight at BKFC. I mean, everybody, even if he's 40, 41, 42 at the time when he finally fights in the BKFC, everybody will be watching that fight. I actually think Conor's going to do really well in BKFC. I've talked to Justin a lot about this. And Justin, my co-host on the show here, he has said that a lot to be successful in BKFC, you need to have freak genetics in your hands. And I've heard over and over everybody talk about how big Conor's hands are relative to his size and his height and everything. I feel like he's going to have those genetics. Plus, with his crisp boxing, his timing, his precision, I think he actually will be pretty good in BKFC. So we shall see, but that's what I think is going to happen. Now, one more quick interview we're going to hear from. We're going to hear from Dave Feldman. So again, in a subsequent interview after the presser, he's asked by this gentleman whether or not Conor will be fighting for BKFC. And he says kind of something along the exact same lines.
And every time he shows up at one of these pressers, he comes in this role as a promoter, but people still ask him, like, what are you going to fight? Where are you going to fight? Are you ever going to step in the BKFC ring, right? And he doesn't say no. He kind of says, like, he's got to clean the slate first. That's what he said here at the presser. You think that ever happens? You think Conor McGregor ever fights under the BKFC ring?
You know, Danny, if he gets those 2 fights done, 100% he does. But, you know, that's a long way away, right? Those 2 fights are a long way away from him. If he has the drive to do it, which I think I've seen a different Conor McGregor. Like you see different Conor McGregor. You see the guy that's like, hey, let me run for president and let me do different things. Then you can see the guy that wants to take care of his family really good, which he always does. But but take care of his family and go in the gym and train. And I know which Conor I'm getting, and I'm getting that Conor right now. So I wouldn't be surprised. And why wouldn't he, though? It's going to help skyrocket the equity that he has. So why wouldn't he?
For sure. And I guess
Skyrocket that equity. There is, you know, what's pretty cool is that I wouldn't be surprised if the BKFC team around him, Dave Feldman included, a lot of these guys are actually going to try and help Conor get back on track, maybe get clean from some of the things that he's been doing, and really take this return to the UFC very seriously. I think he wants to come back. He wants to be a part of the Oval Office event. Maybe that'll be his first return to the UFC. Maybe he's going to return sooner. Maybe the plan is, I mean, imagine this. Maybe the plan is to take a fight before 2025 ends or at the beginning of 2026 and then return for the July 4th UFC Oval Office event. The other cool thing about the impact of this Oval Office event, the White House event, I should say, excuse me. I know some people think it's not going to happen. I think it's going to happen. And I can talk about that in 1 second. But the cool thing is, because it's such a once-in-a-lifetime spectacle, everybody is going to want to show up, all UFC fighters, and nobody is going to. I would be shocked if a single fighter pulls out for any reason, unless they're absolutely barred by the commission or, you know, via medical protocols, and they find something that they just like can't get around. But nobody's going to pull out voluntarily. No way. And just real quick to go back to why I do believe this UFC White House event is going to happen is before the president made any sort of statement about it happening, and that was a bit of a throwaway statement, so I wasn't sure. But Dana White, when you listen to him on the Full Send podcast prior to President Trump saying that, Dana White was on the grounds scoping it out, already planning for this potential event. I think it's going to happen. Plus the way that he described it, meaning like tickets will not be available to the public. It's going to be a VIP only. They're going to invite people. That allays a lot of the concerns that people had over security and why it definitely wouldn't happen. Like, that makes sense. They've had big events at the White House before. So this would just be another big event. They'd have tons of security. They're going to curate the guest list. I think it's going to happen. I think Conor's going to return. And you got to imagine that Conor McGregor is going to want to fight in BKFC when he has this amount of equity. He could probably negotiate for more equity right before he actually fights. I mean, imagine that. So anyways, I think it's going to go down. And the main point, the main takeaway of all of this is we will, as MMA fans, see Conor McGregor return to the UFC. I truly believe that. I think the only way that this won't happen is if his life gets so derailed by all the other distractions that he's literally physically, emotionally, mentally just completely incapable of doing any sort of training or sticking to any sort of clean regimen. But I think he can pull it off. I think he can do it. And this might just be the motivation to get everything sorted out. So we can get Conor McGregor back maybe one, maybe two more times for a UFC fight. Let's go. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you agree? Do you disagree? We will see you in the next video. Take it easy.